right, what's going on, y'all? So today I have my lab work back after being off of testosterone replacement therapy for a little over 4 months. So today I'm going to talk about the lab work, the symptoms I've felt since coming off, where I'm at now, and then the plan moving forward. So to give y'all a little recap, if y'all are new here, I went on testosterone replacement therapy a little over 5 years ago and stayed on it ever since. And during that time, I competed as a pro bodybuilder and ran many steroid cycles. And then at the beginning of this year, I decided to go ahead, try coming off of testosterone completely and recovering my natural testosterone. And I ran a pretty short PCT during that time to come off, kind of what you'd see indicative online, you know, things like the forms, all of that. And that failed miserably. I've got videos on the channel talking about how that one went. So then I decided to build out a very robust PCT plan that lasted quite a while. And I'll talk about what the PCT was towards the end of this video. And then I decided to come off round 2. And I've been off for a little over 4 months now. I believe it's been 4 months and 1 week to be exact. And today I've got my lab work back. So let's just go ahead and dive straight into it. So first off, I'm going to throw up all of the lab work here so you can go through and you can kind of see where I'm at. For overall health markers, everything looked fairly decent, and it looks pretty close to where I was when I was dialed in on TRT. I've talked about my dialed in TRT dose in other videos, but this looks very, very similar to what that is. I've had a slight improvement of hematocrit, is what you'd expect. But overall, very pleased with the health markers. So now let's get into what everybody wants to know is where's my test levels at now that I've been off of testosterone replacement therapy for a little over 4 months. So it came back, total testosterone is 177. Free testosterone was 28.5. And then estrogen was 8. So very, very, very low. This is very discouraging to see. You know, I thought after 4 months, I would be a little bit higher. You know, there's been many men that have come off and recovered their natural ability, and usually 4 months into the process, they're a good bit higher than this. Even Pete Rubish, you know, he was in the mid 3s. I know Vigorous Steve recovered to, I believe, the 600s by this time. And the most concerning part of this whole lab work isn't the testosterone number. You know, that's going to explain how I've been feeling in just a second, but it's the pituitary. So my pituitary is not firing. So we'll talk about why that is in a little bit, but my LH, my luteinizing hormone of 1.1 is pretty dang low. After the PCT I've ran and the amount of time I've been off now, even if testosterone was not, you know, very decent yet, the LH should be much higher than what it is now. And so that's definitely something concerning. So that's what we're going to talk about in just a second. You know, why that is, what the plan is moving forward. But I know a lot of y'all want to know how I've been feeling and all of that. So first off, strength. My strength in the gym, honestly, I've been shocked at what I've been able to maintain. And now, especially seeing the testosterone numbers, I'm blown away at what I've been able to maintain. I had an initial decrease in strength, you know, the first month or so coming off, but it wasn't dramatic. It was maybe 20% drop in top set numbers. And then I was able to hold strength numbers, you know, the rest of the time. I wasn't progressing, but I was able to maintain my numbers every time I went in the gym. You know, with that, there definitely wasn't as much oomph, and I could not get a pump. I could not get a pump in the gym to save my life. But on a strength side, I was able to maintain my strength. Now, a lot of that, and we're going to talk about, you know, the size and the physique in a second. A lot of that I attribute to my locked in training style I've had for the last 6 or so years. You know, the level of muscle maturity and density I built, you know, doesn't just fall away. You know, a lot of people have the misconception that, you know, what you build on testosterone and steroids, if you stop testosterone and steroids, it just all vanishes and you go back to what you would have been naturally. And that's not the case. Will you lose size? Absolutely. Will you lose some strength? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean you're going to go back to what you would have been naturally. That's a huge misconception a lot of people have. Especially someone like myself who I used growth hormone during my time competing as a pro bodybuilder. that actually can create some hyperplasia, and it definitely changes the muscle and really, really solidifies it in. So I attribute a lot of the maintaining strength just to the locked in high intensity style training I've had for 5 or 6 years now. And frankly, guys, I did not change a thing when I came off. When I came off, volume decreased maybe a tad. But other than that, training is what I love to do. Also, it's what I do for my profession. I'm an online coach and a trainer, and it's my passion. It's what I love. So that did not go away. So I maintained all of that, coming off. With that, there was probably about a 20% drop in strength. Size. So my weight came down. At my heaviest, I was 260 pounds, and I was a fairly lean-ish 260 pounds. I had abs at 260. I settled down at about 210 when I came off. So about 208 to 210. Now with that, the body composition did change. So definitely lost some muscle fullness, lost some of the glycogen, and I got a little bit softer around the midsection. So I put on a little bit more body fat than I absolutely had on TRT, but I overall held the weight. I did that intentionally. I was trying to hold my weight as best I could, and I was in a little bit of a caloric surplus to help with the process of me trying to regain my natural testosterone. So with that, I lost a little bit of size. If I had to guess, lost 5 or so pounds of muscle, and then, put on a little bit of body fat in the process. Libido, this is probably the most dramatic change. For the last 4 months now, I've not had a libido at all. As far as, being able to get it up and going, it took a little bit longer, but I had no issues there. It was just, there was zero desire for it at all. Libido has been essentially zero, for the last 4 months. And I'm someone who, I've lived with a high libido for the last 5 years. So this is a very, very, drastic change for my life. Sleep actually deepened. I would need more sleep. So, on TRT, I felt fantastic on about 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. Coming off, I needed, at least 8, but preferably about 9, maybe sometimes even 9.5 hours of sleep every night. And it was very, very, very hard sleep, to where waking up just felt kind of groggy out of it. But it was deep sleep. Never waking up in the middle of the night, anything like that. So, that's probably both pros and cons with that. Mood, this is another kind of big change. So mood, I'm a very, 1, chill, but then 2, very confident and energetic, happy guy. I'm just naturally very happy. I love life, all of that. In the last 4 months, the only way I can describe it is the world has felt very gray. I have had anxiety over the last 4 months. I'm not someone who deals with anxiety at all, to where literally every day, it could be the smallest thing sets it off, to where you get that kind of pit in your stomach type anxiety. That, mentally, because of, just how I am mentally and all that, I'm able to push through it. But it's not fun. And then, like I said, this is not something that I deal with a lot at all. Throughout my entire life, I've never been someone to really deal with anxiety. In the last 4 months, I've absolutely dealt with it. There's been bouts of depression. That's also something that I don't deal with. Like I said, I'm very much a glass half full type person, very happy, have a very positive outlook on life, even when the world seems like it's crumbling around. I have a very kind of happy, positive outlook on life. And the last 4 months, there's been some very, very dark days. And very much attribute, that to this. Drive and motivation. So as you all know, I'm a very driven, motivated person. That carries through with everything in my life, from my business to, when I was competing, to my relationships. I'm very, very driven and motivated, self-improvement. And this didn't completely go away, but it definitely decreased. I would say, if I'm, 100% on TRT, this dropped down to probably about 50%, to where mentally I was able to do everything I need to do for my business. in just day-to-day function, but it took so much more actual mental effort to make that happen. So very, very marked difference here, which you would expect. I mean, guys, we're talking, what was 177 total T. I mean, this is not, when I'm dealing with guys coming off of, or when I'm dealing with guys, coming to me and they're wanting to get on TRT, or guys coming off TRT and they're in the mid twos. The mid twos are usually pretty miserable. I'm very surprised, to be frank, at how I did even just being on, being in the 100s this long. Because, when I got the blood work based off of my symptoms, how I was feeling, I was predicting it to be more kind of in the mid twos based off of how I was feeling. I was not expecting it to be this low. And I'm surprised at, I was able to work out every day. I was surprised I was able to maintain the strength I did. I was surprised that while I was putting on some body fat, I didn't just completely have my physique just completely go to crap. So, pleasantly surprised in some ways. In other ways, definitely felt pretty bad. Now with that, it wasn't all bad. I would say at the beginning of the PCT process when, there's ACG and clomiphene, there was many good moments through all that. There's many times where it felt fantastic, felt very even kill, all of that. But it was as soon as I dropped in clomiphene, and we'll get to the PCT plan in just a second, that's when every week seemed to kind of get worse and worse and worse. So now let's get into the plan and everything. So, that's where, I really wanted to come off and regain, my natural test. And, if you guys know my story, I came on TRT 5 years ago, wasn't just out the gate blasting steroids. It didn't, I did start steroids shortly after TRT, but I got on TRT because I had a blood work result that showed my total test in the mid twos. Now, what I always hypothesized and why I wanted to try to come off is that this was following a very intense ultra running bout. I'd been ultra running for a few years prior to that blood test. And I was running so many miles that I predicted that my low test was just coming in place from that. I did not have the same clean lifestyle I live now. So I figured that, maybe all had to do with that. Now looking at this blood work, either A, I had actual legitimate low natural test before, or B, and this is probably more probable, I have anabolic steroid induced hypogonadism. And that's shown, I've got secondary hypogonadism, meaning my pituitary is not firing to my testicles to make the testosterone. That's where my luteinizing hormone is low. And that's the most concerning symptom of all of this. Like I said, it's not necessarily the low T, it's the fact that my luteinizing hormone this far into being off isn't greater. Could it increase over time? Yes. Will it increase by much? The probability of that is very, very, very low. Now, me having, I have done so much research over the last, 9 months now on PCTs, on guys coming off. I've worked with, and I'm currently working on many guys coming off. And what I can say is that when the pituitary is firing, when someone, comes off steroids, comes off TRT, and their pituitary starts firing, their LH gets at least into the threes, usually they're going to recover to at least a decent amount, assuming that their testes can make good intratesticular testosterone, all of that. But from what I can see with most of the people I deal with, and then most of my research, that comes back when there's secondary hypogonadism from anabolic steroid induced hypogonadism, or if I had secondary hypogonadism before. Unfortunately, the blood work I had from years and years and years ago, I don't have anymore. I remember my total T being somewhere in the mid twos, and I have no clue what my LH FSH was. When it's secondary hypogonadism, the outlook is not great. And what I can say is that living with this low of testosterone is not something I want for the rest of my life. So as you can imagine, I'm going to be on TRT for the rest of my life. I started TRT already a few days ago. Since then, I started TRT a few days ago. Y'all know I do daily injections. I'm literally up already almost 5 pounds. So we're going to see what happens to my physique over the next little bit. But I'm filling out quite quickly. So it was definitely kind of deflated coming off. That's not really the big point. A big part of me coming off was to kind of remove any last bit of ego around my physique. It was coming off for fertility, spirituality reasons. That's another thing, guys. If you want me to talk about, what I experienced spirituality wise, through the course of this time, I absolutely can. There's been some positives, and then definitely some negatives to where, coming off didn't hurt that, but it's definitely not helping my spirituality at all. It definitely makes some things more of a challenge for sure. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to be getting back on TRT. I plan to be on TRT for life now. Have that very, very dialed in, focused on longevity. Kind of what I was at before. I kind of figured out my dose, what really has me in a great spot health wise. How to do this, properly. But I'm excited to not be living, with this low of test anymore. This has been a very, very marked difference. My relationship has been strained from it. Like I said, my business, while I managed everything, there definitely wasn't as much, drive for that. And then I've been kind of on autopilot in the gym, just trying to maintain. So, it's taken a lot. It's taken a lot out of me this year trying to go through this process. So, this is what it is. I like I said, I work with many men, and I would say about 75% of the men I deal with, the issue is more in the testes, and that has a little bit more of a positive outcome. I am dealing with some guys that have secondary hypogonadism where the issue's in the pituitary. And that makes things hard. So back to what my PCT was. So after the failed PCT attempt, I went back on TRT. The max dose I went back on was 20 milligrams a day. And then during that time, I was running 300 IUs of HCG every other day. Over the course of a few weeks, I kept tapering the TRT down while keeping the HCG in. Eventually, I dropped the TRT. I increased HCG up as the TRT was leaving, as the testosterone was leaving my body, all the way up to a dose, I believe it was 2,000 IUs every other day, and I ran that for a few weeks. Then I slowly tapered the HCG down, so total HCG exposure alone, so just HCG mono, not including even the time that I was on TRT, was I believe it was 8 weeks. And then once that tapered off, then I added in enclomiphene at 25 milligrams a day, and I did enclomiphene for 10 weeks. And then, during the HCG, I felt fine. HCG, I believe my total test during that time was in the mid 6s. So I felt good during that time, felt very kind of even kill. And then as soon as I started the enclomiphene, it all started kind of going downhill from there. And then, I've just been kind of living in this kind of gray world for a good minute now. So, I am excited to be back on TRT. This has definitely it's definitely made life a lot harder. And like I said, guys, there's many men that can come off and recover. And I'm so happy when I can see that. Like I said, this was something that I wanted. But what I can say is if you have not started TRT yet, or you've not started steroids yet and you're considering it, anabolic steroid-induced hypogonadism is a very real risk. There's a whole myth out there now that, even if you go on steroids or TRT, just give it enough time and everyone recovers. And that is not the case. I've gone through many, many different research studies. I have dealt with many men personally on this. I've been through thousands of forums. And I can tell you that there are very real cases of men that will be forever shut down, whether that's at the pituitary or the testes. Usually it's the pituitary, and you won't get your test back. So if you've not started yet, and that is something you care about, please really, really, really deeply consider you going on TRT or using steroids. Every single time you do that, and especially if you end up, if you were to just be on TRT with HCG, your chances of recovering after are pretty good. Guys, I did TRT for years without HCG, and I blasted many steroids. I ran nandrolones at time. I did what I did as a competitive bodybuilder, and now I am facing the consequences. So, please just be very, very aware, because, if I had it my way, the nice thing about not being on the last four months is I had 0 injections. It was very nice not having to worry about that, just taking my health vitamins and all of that, and not having to worry about it. And now I'm going to have to do it for life. So, before you sign up for this, know that this could be a permanent decision you make. Anybody saying that, oh, you can just come off, that's not always the case. So, that's where I'm at. I'm going to keep y'all posted over the next several weeks, obviously, on, me getting back on TRT. Like I said, guys, I'm already just kind of filling out. Granted, I did add quite a bit of volume back in the gym this week. I've had a little bit of motivation now. So I've added a lot more volume. So, I know that's where some of the weight's coming back, but I know some weight's going to come back, just me getting back on TRT. So we'll see what happens with that. Other than that, guys, let me know if you've got any questions, comments down below. This has been quite a journey. It's been a long process, and I'm ready to kind of close the chapter on the whole PCT thing. This has been, it's been not a fun process, but we're through it. So let me know if I can answer any questions. All glory to God. God bless you, and have a great rest of your day.